Before the Berlin Conference, the Kingdom of Mossi stretched across what is now Burkina Faso and into Mali, with trade networks reaching even further. Communities spoke dozens of languages, but traded, married, and worshipped together. Then, in a matter of weeks, these communities were split, forced to learn new tongues, pay taxes to foreign governments, and obey laws written in Paris, London, or Brussels. It was not just land that was stolen, it was memory, identity, and the hope of a shared future.
Imagine waking up to a world where, in the course of a single night, 3 African nations erased the borders that had divided them for generations, and the powers that once drew those lines could do nothing to stop it. The sun rises, and the map of Africa has changed forever. The headlines are not ready. The world is not ready. But for millions, the dream of unity that has lived in songs, stories, and whispered hopes is suddenly real. But in the dawn of early 2025, everything changed. In the heart of the Sahel, Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, countries often written off as frail and dependent stunned the world. On a quiet afternoon, their leaders stood together and declared, "As of this moment, the borders are gone. One flag, one army, one future." The streets of Ouagadougou and Bamako filled with people waving the new flag, hugging strangers, while elders wept and young people danced. For once, history was not something done to Africans. It was something they seized for themselves. For more than 100 years, outsiders dictated Africa's fate. At the infamous Berlin Conference of 1884, colonial empires gathered in a chilly European city, far from the heat and life of Africa itself. There, with no African voice present, diplomats and monarchs drew straight lines across ancient kingdoms and vibrant trade routes, shattering bonds that had held for centuries. These lines were not just marks on a map. They were instruments of power, designed to keep Africans fragmented, their resources easier to control, their destinies decided in distant halls. The echoes of this violence still ripple through the continent today, influencing everything from language to economics, from family to nationhood. To understand how this union came to life and why it matters far beyond Africa, we need to unravel the forces that made it possible. The clock is ticking, and every moment counts. The world is watching, but few truly see what is at stake. Turn away now, and you will miss the tremors that could rewrite the future of global power. This is not just a headline. It is a new story in the making, one that could redraw the boundaries of influence, wealth, and hope for Africa and the entire world. The stakes are enormous. This union is not just about 3 countries. It is about a blueprint for all of Africa and for every place where outsiders have written the rules. This was not just a bold gesture. It was a direct strike against the old world order, a message that Africa would no longer wait for approval from Paris, Washington, or Brussels to shape its own destiny. In embassies and war rooms, alarms rang. The status quo had been shattered by an alliance nobody thought possible. Analysts scrambled to explain what had happened. Some dismissed it as a passing storm. Others warned it could spark a chain reaction across the continent. But for the people of the Sahel, it was a sunrise after a century-long night. Colonial borders were never mere lines. They were cages. For well over 140 years, these invisible prisons trapped entire societies, shaping destinies in ways that most of the world still refuses to see. In Africa, the word for border is often the same as the word for wall. These boundaries cut through villages, fields, and rivers. They divided markets that once bustled with life and forced people to carry new papers, learn new languages, and sometimes even forget their own names. Picture the Berlin Conference of 1884. European empires, ignoring Africa's people, carved up the continent like a cake. They drew borders that split families, separated languages, and crushed any hope for real unity. These boundaries were not about creating order. They were about control, ensuring Africa remained divided and easy to dominate. Imagine being told overnight that your cousin was now a foreigner, that the river you always fished in was now someone else's property. For over a century, Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger were instructed to stay weak and dependent. Their gold, cotton, and uranium were siphoned away, their leaders pressured, and every attempt at independence was blocked by Paris, Washington, and other Western capitals. Even after formal colonialism ended, economic and political chains from France, the United States, and Europe kept these nations fractured and exposed. Consider how, in the 1960s, when Guinea tried to break away from French control, Paris responded by stripping the country of everything, right down to the light bulbs in government offices. The message was clear: do not step out of line. Why does this matter now? Because if history repeats, Africans, and anyone invested in the continent's future, stand to lose more than territory or pride. At stake is control over Africa's immense resources, its right to self-determination, and the prosperity of entire generations. The world's smartphones, electric cars, nuclear reactors, and even solar panels depend on African minerals and energy. If Africa remains divided, outsiders will continue to profit, and Africans will see little benefit. But if Africa unites, the global balance of power could shift overnight. But then, in early 2025, the unthinkable happened. The Sahel nations, Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, shattered the colonial map, taking a step no one predicted. In a joint broadcast aired not only across Africa, but streamed worldwide, they announced the dissolution of their colonial borders. They spoke of a new dawn, quoting Pan-African leaders like Kwame Nkrumah and Thomas Sankara, declaring that the age of submission was over. For the first time in more than a century, these countries chose unity over division. Their bold new alliance would force the world to reckon with a new African reality. The streets of Niamey thrummed with celebration. In rural villages, elders gathered to tell young people what it was like before the lines were drawn, and what it could mean to live without them again. 70 million voices, once separated, now echoed beneath one flag. But unity was only the beginning. This new power bloc now controlled more than 1/3 of the world's known uranium, a resource that lights cities and arms nations, and one that foreign capitals crave. Uranium from Niger had long powered the lights of Paris, while many Nigerians lived without electricity. Now, those tables were turning. Old contracts, Niger's uranium deals with France, Botswana's diamond pacts, were declared null and void. The Sahel's message was unmistakable. Africa's riches would no longer be dictated by outsiders. The world's balance of power was shifting, and old empires were put on notice. In a single stroke, decades of diplomatic arrangements and economic dependencies were upended. 3 fragile states, Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, made history by erasing their colonial borders on the 15th of January 2025. Overnight, they declared a single Sahel superstate, forging a new identity in defiance of centuries of division. This was not just a political move, it was a cultural and psychological revolution. Suddenly, millions who had been told to see each other as strangers were now asked to see each other as brothers and sisters. Imagine the weight and the hope in that moment. Western governments retaliated swiftly. Sanctions hammered the superstate, freezing assets and halting aid. News outlets splashed stories of chaos, instability, and risk. Western banks severed financial lifelines, betting pressure would force the alliance to fold. It was a familiar script: economic warfare, media campaigns, and political isolation, all designed to bring the upstarts to heel. But the Sahel superstate refused to yield. Leaders nationalized uranium and other vital resources, seizing back control for themselves. Internal borders fell, allowing people and goods to cross freely, so long as they belonged to Africa. Outsiders found doors slammed shut. In the markets of Bamako, traders from across the region set up new stalls, selling goods that once had to sneak past checkpoints and bribes. Farmers rejoiced as they sent their harvest across old borders without fear. This is more than political brinksmanship. At stake is the right to own and shape Africa's future. Will wealth flow to its people, or continue enriching distant capitals. Every decision carries risk, poverty, upheaval, or even shocks to global markets felt in every home. Imagine the price of uranium or gold doubling overnight. Imagine the world's nuclear plants, from France to China, suddenly facing shortages. The ripple effects could be global. But seizing control is one thing, holding it is another. As the world watches, new threats gather at the superstates' borders. Covert operations, propaganda, and even the threat of military intervention loom large. In the past, Africa has seen what happens when outsiders feel their interests threatened. From the assassination of Patrice Lumumba in Congo to the coups sponsored in Ghana, Guinea, and elsewhere. The leaders of the Sahel know their history, and they prepare accordingly. Could this bold alliance ignite a continental revolution, or collapse under its own ambitions? The stakes are higher than ever. As the Sahel Alliance throws open its borders, it invites not only its citizens, but all Africans to cross freely, trade without barriers, and imagine new futures. In bustling markets from Niamey to Bamako, goods from Dakar and Nairobi are sold side by side. Centuries-old trade routes, long severed by colonialism, are revived for the first time in over 140 years. A generation raised on division is learning to see the continent as a single home. But this openness does more than boost commerce. It sparks a powerful pan-African identity, one that proclaims, "Together we are unstoppable." Across the continent, nations like Ghana and Burkina Faso strike direct deals to harness solar energy, sidestepping Western brokers who once dictated every term. Homegrown alliances are rewriting the rules of development, proving Africans can chart their own course. In universities from Accra to Addis Ababa, students debate the meaning of unity and what a post-colonial future could look like. Yet, the West refuses to watch in silence. In capitals from Paris to Washington, leaders scramble to stem this rising tide. Sanctions are tightened, Western media churns out warnings of chaos, and covert funds flow to opposition groups. The message rings loud. African unity threatens the old order, so every lever of disruption is pulled. In private meetings, diplomats whisper about the African problem, fearing that if the Sahel succeeds, others will follow. Historical parallels abound. In the 1950s and 60s, leaders like Julius Nyerere in Tanzania and Kwame Nkrumah in Ghana dreamed of a united Africa, a continent that would speak with one voice, control its destiny, and end the cycle of exploitation. But their dreams were crushed by foreign interference, internal divisions, and a lack of practical steps. The Sahel Alliance, learning from these lessons, places a premium on slow, deliberate integration. They study the European Union's successes and failures, adopting only what fits their unique context. Inside the alliance, challenges multiply. The Sahel stretches across lands with dozens of languages, legal codes, and centuries-deep cultures. Some worry that merging too quickly could erase hard-won identities. Fierce debates erupt. Whose laws should prevail? Which language will children learn in school? How will new wealth be shared fairly? The memory of past promises broken, like the ill-fated Mali Federation of the 1960s, haunts every decision. But unity is only the beginning. Now, the alliance must survive its first true test. The world is watching, waiting to see if Africa's dream endures or shatters under pressure. The lessons of history are clear. Unity brings strength, but division invites exploitation. The entire future of African self-determination now balances on this fragile unity. If they succeed, prosperity and dignity may finally be within reach for millions. If they fail, chaos and foreign control could return, harsher than before. The stakes could not be higher. The world's eyes are on them, waiting to see if this will be another false dawn or the real beginning of a new era. Still, the alliance's leaders stand firm. They form joint councils with voices from every group, airing grievances in open forums. Integration, military and economic, moves at breakneck speed, but leaders promise transparency and shared prosperity.
Their message is unwavering. Forward, together, no matter how rough the road. They create a rotating presidency to ensure no single group dominates and invest in translation services so that every voice can be heard. When the world tries to shatter you, can unity and radical transparency truly make you unbreakable? The Sahel Alliance bets everything on the answer. They know that only by shining a light on every decision can they avoid the traps that doomed past unions. For the Sahel Alliance, unity was not just a motto, it became an existential necessity. As Western-backed misinformation campaigns swept across the region, old wounds and rivalries threatened to reopen. Yet, the alliance did not retreat behind closed doors. Instead, they threw everything open. Every major decision, every negotiation was broadcast live, with explanations delivered straight to the public. In village squares and city plazas, people gathered around radios and screens to watch their leaders debate and decide. The new leaders stood together at every turn. They created the Sahel Council, a joint institution where each member nation held equal power and the right to veto. Oversight committees, chosen from all corners of the alliance, watched over every move, making it impossible for any single leader or faction to seize control. Transparency and shared authority became their strongest shield. When rumors spread about secret deals or favoritism, the council responded instantly, posting documents online and inviting journalists to ask hard questions. The effect was transformative. Public trust, once fractured, began to heal. Citizens who had doubted their governments now watched as leaders acted in their interest, day after day, in full view. Approval ratings for the alliance's leadership soared, well above 70%. With faith in the process restored, ordinary people became its fiercest defenders, resisting misinformation and outside interference alike. University students volunteered to translate council meetings into dozens of local languages, ensuring every grandmother and farmer could understand what was happening. From there, the alliance turned to economic freedom. No longer content to depend on former Western partners, they forged new agreements with Russia, Turkey, and China. By leveraging their vast reserves of gold, uranium, and oil, the alliance forced the world to take notice. They even began planning a joint currency, a bold step toward escaping the shadow of French economic dominance. These were not just gestures, they were practical, calculated moves to reclaim power over their own destiny. Economists debated the risks and rewards, drawing on lessons from the West African CFA franc and the euro. The deeper lesson is unmistakable. Real sovereignty is not measured by new flags or redrawn borders. It is earned through adaptation, strong institutions, and a refusal to be divided, no matter the pressure. For any movement, anywhere, unity and transparency are the most reliable armor against sabotage. They studied the collapse of the East African Federation, the struggles of the Arab League, and the successes of ASEAN, learning what to do and what not to do. Ignore this, and the cycle repeats. Misinformation, foreign meddling, and infighting will always threaten even the most daring dreams of independence. But draw strength from the Sahel, and you see how resilience is built, not for one nation, but for a continent. The alliance invests in education, teaching a new generation about the dangers of division and the power of solidarity. They establish youth councils, inviting teenagers to help shape the future. But the world does not watch quietly. As the alliance steps into the light, powerful interests prepare their response, determined to reclaim what they have lost. Intelligence agencies, lobbyists, and multinational corporations all scramble to protect their interests. Nonetheless, the Sahel Alliance continues to broadcast its proceedings, publishing every contract and negotiation for the world to see. No one waited for permission. Africa simply stepped forward to claim its future. The world was not ready for this turning point. Will you watch history in motion, or look away and miss the instant everything changes? Across the continent, ordinary people draw inspiration from the Sahel. In Lagos, young activists plan new Pan-African initiatives. In Johannesburg, artists paint murals celebrating unity.
The ripple effect is undeniable. This is only the beginning of the Sahel story. Will you witness it, or let this moment pass you by? If you see the power in unity, join us. Subscribe to follow each new chapter and become part of a movement reshaping not just Africa, but the world. Every sanction, every threat, every headline meant to shame or punish only hardened their resolve. The Sahel Alliance did not break under pressure. Instead, it turned adversity into power. What outsiders called weakness became the foundation of a new resilience. The message is unmistakable. Africa's fate will no longer be decided in distant capitals. The world's resources, the flow of trade, the shape of the future, these are now being redrawn on African terms. If you stand back and do nothing, you risk missing the birth of a new order. This is not only about Africa. It is about who sets the rules of global wealth, who holds the levers of power, and whose stories are allowed to shape our world. Unity, when it is driven by purpose and guided by clear vision, can change the destiny of a continent. Imagine what is possible when division is replaced by trust, when shared ambition is stronger than any old border. Unity is not just a word. It is a deliberate act, made for all to see, led by those who refuse to be trapped by lines drawn long ago. In early 2025, Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger did the unthinkable. They erased their colonial borders and declared a single sovereign alliance. One alliance, one goal, one voice. This was not given by Paris, Washington, or Brussels. It was seized by people who have lived too long under the rules of others. Their courage echoes the struggles of the past, but their future is unwritten. Let us end with a practical challenge. What can you do, wherever you are, to support unity, transparency, and true self-determination, whether in Africa or in your own community? Start by learning the history behind the lines on your map. Ask who drew them and who benefits from them. Support leaders and movements that build bridges instead of walls. Demand transparency from those in power. Share stories of hope and unity, not only stories of fear and division. The next chapter in the Sahel and in global history has not yet been written. Will you help shape it?